My name is Chris Merrick, and I wanted to talk about my recollections of working in the Powell River Mill. In 1964, when I was 17 years old, I was going to Max Cameron High School in Powell River, and I was working part-time in the overweighty store, the brand new overweighty store in the town site. And I started working there the previous year, back in '63. And my family had we lived on Aspen Avenue, just up behind the director's guest house in the town site. And almost all of my friends in the town site, their parents worked for the company, either in the mill or in the office building. And that was something that a lot of us wanted to do when we were going to school to make some money. I recall making about $1.83 an hour in working for overweighty. And the mill base rate at that time was, I think, approximately $2.07 an hour, which was pretty good money. And that was the forest industry's base rate. And like I said, with a number of my friends, we wanted to work in the mill to get a car, do other things like that. And what you could do was get shifts on the weekend when you were going to school. And sometimes you were lucky to get called for a 4 to 12 shift on a Friday. So you'd get off school at 3 o'clock and you'd hustle home, get your lunch, and go down to the mill, work 4 to 12. And then, of course, in the summertime, you've got pretty well regular shifts all summer. But to get hired as a student school casual worker, you had to apply to the personnel department in the mill office building. And you met with Chuck Wilcox. Chuck was the hiring person, or Jack Pearsall, who was his assistant. You'd finally get an appointment to see Chuck, and that would involve a lot of meetings going down there to the personnel office. And you would get asked a number of questions regarding the reason why you wanted to work in the mill, and how was your schooling going, and what was your family background, what were your plans for the future, all that kind of stuff. And after you met with Mr. Wilcox, you would then finally wait to get a phone call to find out if they would hire you, because they had to do their evaluations, do whatever they wanted, I guess. But when you were successful and they phoned you up, you went down to the mill safety office, which was located down by the wharf's office. And you would then meet with the company nurse down there for a general health check. They would do a hearing and eye exams. And then there would be a safety talk on the dangers of equipment and work areas, especially with the emphasis on wearing proper footwear, clothing, along with ear and eye protection. Then you would be taken by one of the security watchmen around to a number of the departments to show you where you would report if you were assigned there. You were also shown the time card system, which was located in the time office by the mill gate, just behind the security office. I always remember very clearly the excitement that I had when I was phoned for my first shift. It was like, oh, I seem to have made it. It was a day shift in the steam plant. And when a worker arrived in any department, you had to report to the shift boss for whatever work assignment you were given. And my very first job in the mill was working with a crew, and it was called raking the grates in the steam plant. And this involved using very long-handled metal rake that must have weighed, I would say, between 80 and 100 pounds. And it was, I don't know, 20 feet long. And what you did was it was levered over a catwalk railing, and you would push it into through the opening of a porthole opening at the base of the six-story boiler. And when the rake, you push it all the way into the back of the boiler floor, and then you drop it down, and then you pulled it like you were raking towards the front. And you wore pretty heavy gloves because the metal got kind of warm after being in the boiler, because the boiler was running. It wasn't shut down. And you would pull the red hot coals and the slag out towards you. And as it came out through the opening of the porthole, there was a little chute, and it fell down into a water flume that ran below the catwalk. And I have to tell you, it was quite an experience trying to maneuver this very heavy piece of metal. I mean, I was in pretty good shape then, and I'm not a small person. But they always heard to let the young guy try these things, and then they'll show you how to do it. The older workers showed you the tricks of handling it, how to use and lever it on different things and that. So anyhow, that was my welcoming to the world of working in the mill. And I also worked other shifts in the steam plant, were jobs that I certainly didn't want to do the rest of my life. I wasn't a steam engineer or anything like that. One of them that I recall very clearly also was involved putting on a pair of thick asbestos-soled boots. And the soles had to be about at least 4 inches thick. And you crawled across a wooden plank through a porthole that was open at the bottom of the floor along with a few other young guys. It was obviously a bunch of us young guys. I guess the regular guys didn't have to do this job. And our job was to shovel out the coals and the slag from the bottom of the boiler. And the rules, from what we were told, was the boiler should be shut down for at least 24 hours. But sometimes the shift bosses in the steam plant would want to get a few extra drops of steam out. So they wouldn't shut it down as early as they should have. So consequently, when you get in there and you'd have a big flat nose shovel and you'd shovel into the slag, and the top few inches would be gray, looked like dead ash. But a few inches below that, it was red hot coals. And we used to think it was like working in hell. And it was a job that we all hated, and we really thought it wasn't very good for our health, because you're breathing in these fumes, you're in this boiler, and you would have coveralls on, but my God, it was hot in there. Anyhow, it was a job that we didn't like. Another job that I had in the steam plant, which I didn't enjoy very much either, was when the boiler was shut down, you'd go to the top, to the 6th floor, and they'd open a porthole again in this chamber at the top of the boiler. And you'd be wearing a full rain suit and gumboots and have goggles on and ear protection. You'd crawl into the chamber. It was a metal chamber, I could say the top of the boiler, and they would pass you in a hose, a high pressure hose, not as big as a fire hose, but a high pressure hose. And it would have a metal nozzle on the end that was probably 3 or 4 feet long, and it was quite heavy. It had a weight on the end of it. So you get in there and you'd sit on the floor, and there would be all these holes in the floor, and they were the openings at the top of the boiler tubes. And I don't know how many there was. There had to be each boiler. I mean, I don't know. It seemed to be there would be 100, but maybe there was only about 80. Who knows? I never really counted them all. And your job was to, when the hose was turned on, was to push the metal end and the hose down each tube, all the way till it reached the bottom of the boiler, 6 stories. And of course, sometimes you would have slag built up on the side of the tubes, so the thing wouldn't go, so you had to pound it. You'd lift the thing up and down, and you'd be pounding it to break up the slag attached to the impurities that accumulate on the inside of boiler tubes. So you did that for every one of them. You start at one corner, you work all the way across the top, and God help you if you forgot one, because the bosses would go to the bottom and have a big light there, and they would shine the light, and you could look down each tube and see if you could see the light. And if it wasn't, then they said, hey, you missed a tube. Anyhow, you did that, and that was your job for the whole day. And I'm telling you, it's a wonder people didn't get piles, because you sat on cold metal, wet, cold metal all day on your shift. Anyhow, it wasn't, like I said, a job that I really wanted to do anymore. But I thankfully didn't do that very often.